Good afternoon and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining the Enterprise Digital Learning Modernization Reform webinar. This webinar will provide an overview of EDLM and how it will help facilitate modernization of DoD learning systems. The EDLM goal is to build an enterprise-wide digital learning environment that provides efficient acquisition from spending management for education and training products and services, while also building toward an integrated digital learning ecosystem. Our speakers today are Kelly Sims from the EDLM Defense Enterprise Business and Operations Directorate, Noel Safford of Powertrain, Paul Jessikiewicz from USALearning, although we may have a guest speaker in place of Paul Jessikiewicz and Dale Carpenter, and Dr. Van Brewer from the ADL Initiative. Our speakers will be sharing their slides on the details of the EDLM for about 45 minutes with short breaks between each line of effort description where they'll pause for questions. If you have a question at any point in time during this presentation, just click on the questions panel in the GoToWebinar window and type your question there. Any questions the speakers don't get to throughout the presentation will be saved for the end. They will try their best to get to as many people within the hour as possible. This webinar will be recorded and distributed to everyone registered following the event. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Kelly Sims.
Good afternoon, everyone. The Enterprise Digital Learning Modernization effort is DoD's path to the future for interoperability and talent development in a digital learning ecosystem. In 2018, DoD established an IT and business system reform effort that we now call the Enterprise Digital Learning Modernization effort. If you're familiar, you might remember the old name, which was Rationalized Business Systems Learning Management IT Reform. This reform focuses on providing one centralized digital learning ecosystem for all DoD active duty and civilian employees, yet an integrated learning environment for approximately 3 million DoD users. In April 2019, OPM and DoD signed a memorandum of agreement outlining responsibilities and desired outcomes from this reform. At the same time, the DoD Chief Management Officer, Ms. Hirschman, issued a memo directing all DoD components to utilize USALearning to acquire training and education products and services. The intent of the Enterprise Digital Learning Modernization is to build an enterprise-wide digital learning environment that provides efficient acquisition and spending management for education and training products and services. It's about the efficiency of the process, while also building toward an integrated digital learning ecosystem, which is the modernization. The reform effort includes 3 distinct lines of effort, but the vision for DoD digital learning ecosystem is even bigger. The 3 specific lines of effort that were approved by the Reform Management Group include category management, or as we call it, USALearning Assisted Acquisition, a course catalog, an enterprise course catalog for all of DoD, and an enterprise learning record repository. So let's talk about the first line of effort, category management. Do you know how much your department spends on training and education products and services? Do costs for the same products and services vary across the departments? Well, instituting USALearning as a category management solution allows us to better manage our requirements and provides visibility into what we are buying and spending across the agency, thereby leading to better decision-making opportunities. It streamlines the acquisition process. It makes it faster and more efficient. USALearning ensures IT security requirements are met and ensures we acquire software as a service in a cloud environment. It also improves our ability to identify shared service opportunities and to leverage existing technology. For example, WHS has an LMS through USALearning. The financial community realized that it met their needs as well, and they just piggybacked off the same USALearning task order, eliminating months of acquisition process and paperwork. The category management effort, or USALearning Assisted Acquisition, process streamlines and centralizes acquisition of education and training capabilities. In addition to the MOA and the memo that the CMO signed. We've also partnered with category management reform teams. We've developed a USALearning project portal that you will hear about later on in this presentation. And then we've also, you will soon see an extension memo from the CMO providing interim guidance within the next month. The second line of effort is to build and implement an enterprise-wide course catalog. Why do we need a central course catalog? Because today course data is inconsistent and inaccessible. It's hidden in hundreds of systems and spreadsheets across the department. We need to better manage and utilize all of the DoD courses and digital learning that is spread out across the agency. We need to reduce duplication of effort, leverage our resources, and provide a better user-customer experience. Are you frustrated with the number of systems and sources you have to go to access different training requirements? And how many hours have you spent searching for specific training courses to meet your learning needs? Imagine if you could go to one DoD source to find all the training that DoD has to offer. Well, a central course catalog will consolidate information from local DoD course listings into a single enterprise capability that promotes search, discovery, and alignment of DoD learning activities. The third line of effort is a centralized learner record repository or store. Have you ever heard or had to repeat mandatory training such as cyber training simply because you did not have an acceptable certificate or proof that you already completed the training? Perhaps you got a new job and they simply wouldn't accept the training certificate. Did you know that in DoD, approximately 40,000 employees move to new jobs within the department each year? And the majority of the time, their training records don't follow them. It's very hard to get a hold of your training certificates, and the times you have to repeat the training. Shouldn't you be able to access your training record from anywhere you go within the department? Building an enterprise learning record store will enable sharing of local and global learner data across DoD, including conferred credentials, attributes, preferences, and privacy settings through a federated data strategy that pulls data from authoritative sources. In order to achieve these three lines of effort, we brought together key stakeholders to form an executive steering committee for the Enterprise Learning Digital Modernization Act. Senior executive representatives from our DoD organization stepped forward to protect their interests and serve as champions to make this DoD goal a reality. They include Mr. Fred Drummond, Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Force Education and Training, with subject matter expertise from the Advanced Distributed Learning Program Office. The newly appointed Laura Mushmore of the Office of Chief Management Officer under the Defense Business Systems and Enterprise Operations Directorate is also a lead for this reform effort and responsible for that this effort supports the entire department. Ms. Michelle Losalis from the Defense Civilian Personnel Advisory Services is another senior representative. And number 4, Mr. James Secord represents the OUSD Intel community. So now that you have an overview of this reform effort, let's learn a little more about each of the three lines of effort. First, we're going to start with line of effort 1, USALearning Assisted Acquisition, which is actually a category management application or process. First, you may be wondering, what in the world is USALearning? What is it, who is it, or what is category management? So let's start with category management. Category management is the business practice of buying business services as an enterprise to eliminate redundancies, increase efficiency, and deliver more value and savings from acquisition programs. Did you know that OMB recognizes USALearning as a best-in-class solution for acquiring training and education products and services? Next, what is USALearning? What is it? Who is it? Some people I've talked to actually thought it was an LMS or a tool for digital learning. USALearning specializes in delivering assisted acquisition for federal agencies. They help organizations and deliver customized LMSs, commercial off-the-shelf products, and licenses for digital learning. It's a government office that provides federal agencies with a streamlined and faster method to acquire training and education products and services. USALearning is a center of excellence for digital learning because they just don't acquire training and education products and services faster and easier. More important, they offer their expertise in digital learning technology. They provide a service with value. The USALearning staff is embedded in the digital learning community and stays connected to those who are at the forefront of learning technology, like the Advanced Distributed Learning Program, who engages in learning research and development efforts to provide DoD with the most informed guidance on digital learning. So again, let's reiterate what we will gain by utilizing USALearning assisted acquisition. First, through implementation, we will start to centralize similar requirements under one system. Second, we'll provide a streamlined acquisition process that substantially reduces the acquisition cycle time. The average acquisition cycle time under USALearning is 30 to 45 days, depending on the complexity, compared to 9 to 12 months for the normal DoD acquisition cycle. Next, we're able to look across the department and identify opportunities for increased shared services. For example, at the end of FY17, the Fourth Estate had 34 independent learning management systems. Just by having visibility of these systems and communicating USALearning opportunities, today we have 17 independent systems, over a 40% reduction. We're looking at current contracts, and 6 months prior to the end of the performance period, we're appointing organizations to USALearning. The organizations are able to see the digital learning capabilities resident across the department, and with USALearning's expertise, select an existing solution that fits their needs in lieu of reinventing the wheel. Of course, consolidating the acquisition of similar requirements, such as license and commercial off-the-shelf software or products, increases economies of scale and provides better buying power. Oh, and did you know that USALearning also offers customers an environment to test digital learning requirement capabilities? Unless you have questions, I'm going to turn it over now to Dale Carpenter to tell you about what USALearning can do for you and how it works.
Thanks, Kelly, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dale Carpenter. I'm the Business Operations Manager at USALearning, and I'm excited to share some of the information that, as Kelly mentioned to you, we're an assisted acquisition for the government to acquire learning products, services, systems, pretty much anything that has to do with adult learning and the government, we can provide through our single award integrator. So as Kelly mentioned, we are a best-in-class solution through as designated by GSA, and that allows you to know that you're getting the best services at the best cost that the government can provide. So through that best-in-class, we're able to offer services that you would normally, as Kelly mentioned, have to go out to contract that take 6 to 9 months. For LMSs, sometimes longer, depending on how complex your application may be. We shorten that time. We do the acquisition for you. We have a team that works with you, that works for me, of account managers that assist you with the interagency agreements, the MIPR, and all those things that are required to use our service. So our goal is to give you the time and flexibility in your schedule to do what you normally do and not have to focus all your effort on acquiring the services that you need for support of your agency or a service for LMSs, for course development, and again, anything that has to do with adult learning in the services. Some of the benefits, we work closely with ADL. We have for years, and we believe in plug and play architecture. We believe in using softwares that are open source that cost the least amount of money for the government, but we can also provide commercial applications as well. We're not tied to any one solution. We're agnostic about various software products, and so because of that, with your statements of work, with your needs, we can help you find the best combined solutions and put those together under a single award for you. That gives you the advantage of a centralized buying power. We're able to buy in bulk volume, and again, offers you a lot more variety of what you can put together versus having to stay with one system or one commercial product. We offer the capability of you choosing that, and if you don't like your LMS now and you want to move to another LMS next year, we can do those things much faster and easier. Next slide. This chart looks a little busy, but it shows the flow of how a project starts and ends up in an acquisition, and really it's pretty simple. If you focus on that 5 to 30, 5 to 10, and 30 to 45 days, those are the times in between these parts of the process that are actually much shortened over your typical acquisition. The first one, the 3 days, is really important, and that is through our project portal, which we're going to provide that link to you in just a moment. That 3 days means you enter a project that you're interested in. Our team looks at it and says, we have the capability, that's within our swim lane, and yes, we can provide that service, or no, that's too far outside of our swim lane. One of them was for a fiber optics link, communications link. Well, we don't do that. It's outside of what we do. So we get back to you so that if we can't do the project, you're able to go on and find a resource that can, another resource. So after that, we work with you to prepare the PWS. We give you a ROM, which is a cost estimate. Those are pretty tight. So we respect the fact that you have budgets, and we want to make sure that we are able to provide that service within the budget that you have. It goes through the finalization through MIPR process. Again, we have folks that are helping you along the way with that process and keep it moving until we get to a task order. We don't leave you there. We're still with you until that task order is 100% complete. So if it needs a modification, if it needs something done to it right now, as you can expect, we have contractors working on bases, and one of the modifications we're having to make changes to is where they're working, because it's in the best interest of them and the government if we're able to, for some of them to work off site. So as you can imagine, those things would normally take a lot of effort. We work with you through that whole process and help you with that. It mentions record, evaluate. Kelly is very closely tied with our office managers, with Paul and Will Parentino, who's the director, and reviewing what we're doing, how well we're doing, customer satisfaction, volume of business, in order that she is aware and can let her leadership and you know how we're doing. So I would encourage you to reach out to myself with questions, but let us know how we're doing. We look forward to getting that information. There's below there you see monitoring compliance, how we do process improvement. All of those things are continuous process, continuous cycle that allows us to do the work as most efficiently and the best way possible. Next slide. So if you would take down this information for that link, that's the projects portal that we mentioned. Right now it's DoD only, and I think you'll find it to be very efficient at taking your information. One of us, probably myself, would get back to you with any questions. And if you have any questions about using the portal, please reach out to me. The site, once you get to it, you'll find that you can create an account very easily. With that, I'd like to pass the mic over to Noel Safford, who will take you a little bit deeper into how the project portal works. Noel?
All right. This is the projects.usalearning.net portal tracker. This is the first step in the USA Learning Assisted Acquisition workflow. Once you have logged into the system, you are presented with the option to submit a project request. This will allow you to enter in pertinent information about your potential project request, and that information will then be presented to USA Learning. The information collected is fairly straightforward, information about your first and last name, the agency you are working with, email addresses for any user, any person who should be kept in the loop on this project. I should note that email addresses entered here will receive update emails as this potential project request is processed. Enter in your office number. You are also able to set a name for the project, a tentative name. It may change over time. Specify, right now, all users are Department of Defense, but in the future, this system will permit outside of the Department of Defense, so you're able to select that. USA Learning provides a list of typical types of projects used. You can select all that are applicable for you. If you're unsure, you can simply select other. You're able to write in a description of your needs and upload a project requirements document. The blue links provide you with information about what sort of information USA Learning would like to receive, including information about a performance work statement. If you have a rough order of magnitude for your project, you can enter it here. And then once all items have been entered, you simply save that request. Now, also, only takes numbers. Once submitted, the project request will immediately generate an email to USA Learning to notify them that it has been sent. That I'm included on that as I developed the site. The system will features a comment system which allows USA Learning to communicate directly with you and pose requests in addition to their ability to reach out directly. This provides a central location where this information can be collected. If you have multiple project requests, you can find each project request under your My Project Requests. Clicking on the title of the project will send you back to that initial page and will give you the update for each item's status. The current status for this obviously being a reviewing requirements for a go, no-go decision. That concludes the demonstration of the USA Learning Project Tracker. I believe we are now looking for questions.
So if you haven't submitted any questions yet to the questions panel in your GoToWebinar panel, then go ahead and type them in there. We have a couple in the queue already, so I'll pull those up. So the first one for our panelists is part comment, part question, and it is ECC is really a portal, correct?
Since this is a question about the ECC, I'll actually address that in a bit. It will include a portal, but the heart of it will be the API and the standards behind that portal, which will allow applications to be able to get to those. And you're absolutely right. Course has more of a blurred meaning as we move ahead in time and move toward ubiquitous lifelong learning. But we're using that right now to talk about an encapsulated program with specific implementation across the services or the fourth estate. So point is well taken, but that's kind of the way we're moving ahead with it from where we are today.
All right.
I hope that addresses your question. Over.
Thank you. All right. Well, good answers. We'll look at the next one then. Our open source FOSS, etc. under USAL.
Hi, this is Dale. Open source I guess I'm trying to understand the question, and FOSS, I'm not familiar with that acronym. If whoever wrote the question, if you could spell that out, maybe it's something I haven't seen. As far as open source, we have an LMS that's internal to USA Learning that is based on open source code base, but has been federalized. In other words, it has all the security controls, it has all the privacy, the login through CAC enabled, PIV enabled, depending on whether it's agency or DoD. All those things, plus it has SF-182 for the federal agencies and some other tools that are unique to the federal government based on an open source LMS. But we also work with other open source. LRS is an open source specification through the ADL. We have an LRS that's available. So I don't know if that answers the question, but if it involves learning, we love open source because it is in the long run more maintainable in many cases, and usually, if not always, lower cost than your commercial solutions. And we're not saying that it's always the best solution. There are commercial applications as well that are used by many of our customers. I hope that answered the question, and if whoever wrote the question could spell out the FOSS, I'll be happy to address that.
We actually got an answer for that. It's free and open source software.
Okay. Well, the same answer. So in our applications, the Moodle is base code for the LMS that we utilized. It's, again, since federalized. Some of the LRSs that we're using are open source, but they've been customized for use with our LMS. So again, I think that probably answers that question, hopefully. Thanks.
All right, and we've got some questions rolling in, but in the interest of time, I think we're going to hop back onto the normal slides, and then we'll come back to some of those questions at the end. So here we go. We'll keep going with our next speaker, Dr. Van Brewer.
Hello, and appreciate everyone who is watching live or recorded. Before I begin, I wanted to introduce a few other panelists that are sitting in the wings. Two that I consider to really be thought leaders in the total learning architecture. Both Dr. Say Schatz, Director of the Advanced Distributed Learning Initiative, and Mr. Brent Smith, who CETA contractor, is the R&D principal, and both of them have been involved with TLA and these concepts throughout their life cycle. We also have someone I consider to be pretty much the technical expert, and that's Mr. Jerry Gordon, who's our technical director, also a CETA contractor. So if you have detailed questions, hopefully we'll be able to support any deep dive that you might have as well. Now, next slide, please. Line of effort 2 is about the enterprise course catalog. All of you training education professionals are very well acquainted with how historically we've had this disparate, unintegrated nature of training education systems. Not surprising. We know that in the largest sense, K through 12 higher education, industry, military, government have very distinct communities of practice. That's trying to there's efforts to integrate across those now. But within DoD, obviously we've got the across the services, fourth estate, and other divides that we mainly they come from the fact that we train and educate for a reason, for a system. We train for a mission, and the training education tends to be associated with that. So that leads to all these different disparate solutions, and sometimes that leads to overlap in what we're offering in terms of training and education. This project seeks to assist in managing that by getting a single enterprise course catalog that'll allow us to identify duplicate courses, but mostly would allow individuals and administrators to know what's out there and to be able to better plan and understand the tools that are available to them to further their capabilities and our service members' careers. So this solution that we propose is called an enterprise course catalog. And what you'll see is if there are hundreds of course catalogs out there today, in Excel spreadsheets, paper, or other forms. This is not about making the 101st, but rather giving us the ability to federate across those. So this is a solution that's not focused on enforcing a single requirement, but more about leading us to interoperability. Next slide, please. So the pieces of the ECC are 4 parts. There is first data standards, that's so systems can understand each other. There is a governance structure and schema server, which helps manage the configuration of the federation of course catalogs. There's a repository we call the experience index at each site. That's sort of the common information that allows that federation. And finally, there's a single entry web portal that the question earlier was referring to that provides the enterprise search catalog so it can appear that all those federated catalogs were one. Now, the architecture includes, well, the elements you really would expect. There is an element to determine who is dealing with it. The challenges of federated identity, credential, and access management are a significant component for all of our security, PII, and other issues. There's a means to have a common element across all the catalogs that are being federated, and that's that experience index. There's the schema that revolves what things mean across catalogs. And ultimately the web service that provide access. And as I mentioned, that web service is really just an interface in front of the API. It's the API and the standards that gives us the interoperability. You could well down the road have applications that access that API using those standards and bypass the portal to be able to access directly. And again, we are not recreating a local catalog capability. We're building the tools to scrape those existing catalog systems ultimately and federate that data up to the enterprise course catalog. So we're trying to make it so this is something that is an upgrade to existing systems, not a replacement. So what are the big benefits of this? First, as I referred to, this is an evolutionary approach to interoperability. It doesn't require everybody to adopt this one new catalog, one new format. It means that a participating catalog or LMS will be able to be modified to meet these standards, and be able to access information through the API. It means that individuals and administrators can access information through the portal directly. The second is the searchable directory of DoD course listings. And this is where we get to sharing the learning resources and facilitating accessing those. We're fond of saying we're looking for duplication, but perhaps there's more value in finding what all is out there that might be able to extend some of your own outcomes that you're looking to attain. And finally, getting this level of metadata standardization means that we're going to have a finer grained perspective of those learning packages that will help enable organizations in meeting their readiness requirements and enable service members in their lifelong learning. In the first year, this period, you'll see a schedule on the next slide. We're going to look to achieve an initial operating capability, really just a minimum viable prototype. So we can develop the metadata specifications, we can develop the ideas and the implementation of the experience index, and we can shake out the prototype to ensure that it's ready to be moved ahead. We will do that in concert with designated stakeholders so that when we evaluate this, it will be in a operationally realistic manner, not pristine conditions. I hesitate to say TRL6 because that's an acquisition term, but we're looking for an operationally significant evaluation that this functions for our stakeholders. This will be a capability we mentioned before. Kelly mentioned USALearning has an environment where you can get on and evaluate and use learning capabilities, we will be looking for this course catalog to be available through that sandbox, as we refer to it, so that you can access it and evaluate it relative to your systems there. And finally, this schedule, we haven't kicked off the ECC yet. It's in we're trying to get it in the final path to get the award out there. But as I mentioned, we're looking for that MVP baseline up front with the metadata and the minimum viable product, and a dedicated test and evaluation segment to really understand how that's working for us. And based on that, we'll look to move ahead with full operating capability development, and then we would be looking at migration to be able to exploit the ECC capabilities. And that's all I have for this, and I will defer to our facilitator, Liz, if we want to stop for questions, or if we want to go ahead and wrap up the next segment.
I think we can probably take one question. This one is a little long. Hold on a second. Let's see. This one says, will the course catalog limit view of offerings based on who is eligible for utilizing the training? For example, if the offering is only available to certain job series, so that when a DoD employee is logged in looking for training, they only see the offerings that are available to them.
And the answer there is back to the idea of identity and access control. The short answer to this is no, this is not designed to be plugged into a single aspect. It's going to be designed to allow you to search a course catalog. The slight restriction there is if you aren't allowed to see information for some reason, that's the identity and access control that we're talking about. And that could be classified information or something like that that you won't see. But it is not intended to limit, it is intended to expand, to give you access to see the breadth of course offerings that are out there. Since the Reform Management Group's instructions say that we are going to implement, ultimately that the greatest extension of this, or fullest implementation, would be able to see what's available across all of DoD. I hope that answers your question.
All right, okay. With that, we'll move on to the ELRR section. Dr. Brewer.
All right. As with the Enterprise Course Catalog, this tremendous diversity of training education systems across DoD led the Reform Management Group to try to move us toward interoperability, access to training records, and further the idea of ubiquitous lifelong learning. If we're going to do that, if we're eventually going to head in that direction, we're going to have a way for these learner records to be more than single copies in single places, or even one single, there is an airman learner record, or there is an Army learner. There are records for good reason, for specific purposes, but we don't have the ability yet to share information across the silos. So once again, the solution was a course of action that would work towards interoperability. So this isn't about forcing everyone to use the same format. I would submit that's literally impossible, because we don't know what next year's requirement could be. So it could be a new requirement. Instead, it's about how do we get to the same kind of federated solutions where we have the ability to look across many learning records and have them appear to be like one source. The ELRR boils down to about 3 components. Again, we have data standards for sharing information about learner competencies, credentials, and other learner attributes. I'm sure many of you are involved in any one of the number of efforts about credentialing and competencies and competency frameworks. So continuing to work with those diverse and disparate efforts, we'll want to figure out a way to make sure that we have a common understanding of what we mean when we say certain things, or data says certain things. We want to have this idea of a local learner profile, but that will have a data service that will use an open interface that makes it available to the global search, find, and share capability. And that's the capability that, since it can access all of those very many local learner profiles, can follow a learner throughout their entire career. I just say the end state here is, again, about ubiquitous lifelong learning. So we're trying to ensure that we can enable those types of ideas, and furthermore, enable interoperability right now. The architecture starts really with those local learner profiles. Again, we're not looking to supplement, or we're not looking to replace those. This is going to be complementary or supplementary to that. So those profiles, we will have standards and services that allow them to federate to a larger data fabric. And based on your technical theology, that may be a data mesh or a data lake or whatever term you wish, but it is about getting to scaling data to the degree that we're going to be using it in the 5-10 years ahead. Right, so that's orders of magnitude additional data, and gets us into those big data concepts. That's important for being able to exchange large data sets at scale, and accessing globally relevant data about learners means that we can start to get to some of that truly data-driven decisions, both on the organizational scale and on an individual scale. But we will also have the directory service and some kind of schema server. That means we can link that data, and there it's all about making sure that it's semantically and syntactically consistent. So to reiterate those bullets, we want to use a federated approach enabled by a data fabric. We want to decouple data services from the applications layer, right? So that now that data can be available not only to learning, but manpower personnel systems as well. This will enable scalability so that we can start to apply those big data concepts. Machine learning, artificial intelligence are just, we have to dig into those a couple layers to determine what they really mean, but it is the ability to harvest big data and make decisions based on that data. And finally, the schema server that will replicate the public schema.mil server that replicates what schema.org does, so we can control access and ensure that we can securely align learner data within DoD. So what do we get out of this? As before, we get an evolutionary approach where we can grow towards interoperability. So this is really just saying, how do you build structures so we can get to that interoperability across learner records without major emotional events being introduced into the lives of hundreds of training education programs and systems. Second, we are adopting really the most current industry trends and systems and messaging to enable this. Really, most DoD systems are reaching the culmination of data concepts from the 90s. Those systems won't survive the exponential growth in data that we're going to face in the next few years. Instead, we want to adopt or ensure that we leave open the capability to adopt those big data concepts like machine learning. This is all about getting the feedback or the interoperability between components of the talent management system. So we learn about readiness in time to do something to affect it. We don't want to wait for the ship collision to tell us there's something wrong. And that will require an entirely different level of data and analysis. And there's much work and many years to go to get to that point, but this is the path that we have to walk if we want to be able to get to that. And that's the ultimate benefit, I think. This is all about getting data where it needs to be and when it needs to be there. Again, the ELRR effort is just, we're getting it teed up to get kicked off and started. It's very similar to the ECC, that the first year is about getting past the initial set of specs and practices, services, governance, so forth, but all oriented toward generating a minimum viable prototype in the first year. And once again, we will look to evaluate and work with designated stakeholders to conduct more robust tests under realistic conditions, the goal being to achieve that TRL6-like level of functionality. Some of them that we are in discussions with are ATEC and the Airman Learner Record, the Army, and their Army Training Information System, and the Defense Health Agency. And again, just a map of that schedule that I just spoke to. We hope to get this kicked off soon so that we can get this realized in early 2021. And with that, concludes my presentation for today. So I'll yield the floor back to Liz for questions. Over.
Is there any distinction to be made for training courses versus education courses?
I'll field that one. No, here we're talking about learning. So we generally tend to talk about training and education as aspects of learning. Now that's a principle. That's not to say that there may be practical considerations that lead us to treat those differently as we move into migration. But the intent here is to talk about learning systems.
How is the catalog managed to ensure the information is current and accurate, especially since the course details are subject to change at any time?
The best issue, it's a great question, but the best, that's also kind of a justification. The information can be no better than the information that's in the local catalog, right? So our best option there is if we can access the latest and most current information. So if we have to rely on reporting and roll-ups through some type of hierarchical system, we're going to live with lag in the system forever. So one of the benefits of a federated approach is it at least means you're getting the most current information. We'd have to have separate auditable procedures about the accuracy and fidelity of individual information about courses. So I'm absolutely correct in that second point. Over.
Okay, and then next question. Has there been any progress with resolving assisted acquisition hurdles for the Navy?
Kelly, this is Dale. I'm trying to think of context. There may be a specific on this that I'm not sure how to answer. If there's something on our side that prompted this question, I would encourage the author to please reach out to us, unless Kelly, unless you have information on that.
So this is definitely a question for the CMO's office. There are several hurdles that we're trying to get through, and as you probably know, each department has different requirements and policies and procedures. We are working on this issue at a higher level. Another issue that's very similar is there's a requirement, the BCAC process that you're probably familiar with, that you have to go through before you, when you're investing in IT systems. So there are several people in the CMO's office who are working on this, and we're also working with ANS to get these things resolved.
All right.
So progress, no, but we're working it.
Okay, all right, next question. Any insights as to what constitutes duplications at subject level, content/LO level?
I'll field that, but also Jerry or Brent, if you want to jump in.
Sure. That will probably be a complex field that is culled from the metadata. So a lot of the reason that we're putting the effort into the metadata that we are is to find all the real points of difference. Some of that is in the alignment to an educational goal. Some of that is in the source of the requirement. You know, the obvious villains in the duplication level really come from regulatory training. There's probably 40 different versions of electrostatic discharge avoidance training out there, and there probably doesn't necessarily need to be. Obviously, there's some organizational specifics, but a lot of the stuff can be reused. So that will be part of the metadata metadata effort. So more data is always better in terms of training computers to discriminate. So that's a big portion of why we think that the efforts to really get the metadata right is so important. for those who worked on the very beginnings of SCORM, and I did it from the industry side, there was always a field that was designed for the purpose of making good on the S, which is shareable, but without a good clearinghouse in order to be able to provide the things that were used to type the different types of training and then to evaluate them and make those references, it was less useful. And that's why those portions of the metadata never really got filled out, because there wasn't really a mechanism to take advantage of it. But we see this catalog as helping to fill that gap this time. So there will be that clearinghouse, and there will be that governance structure in place to make sure that people are filling out the fields that actually provide benefit to the entire community.
All right, thanks, Jerry. I think we have one more question here. This question: if you are satisfied with your current LMS, will you be able to renew a contract with our current LMS?
This is Kelly. So yes, if you're satisfied with your current LMS, you can renew. You can have the same LMS, but the contract vehicle is going to be different. You're going to need to go through USALearning.
Okay. We don't have any more questions yet in the panel, and it looks like we're getting close to the end. So how about from our panelists, do you all have any words of wisdom you'd like to leave everyone with?
Just to add, this is Van again. Just want to encourage everyone. We are leaning forward and welcome any of your questions or inquiries. We are focused on solutions and making things working better. If we can find a better way to do it, we'll do it. If we can't find a better way, we'll try to figure that out quickly. Furthermore, for our efforts like ECC and ELRR, we are always looking for those stakeholders who want to get involved, possibly be test locations, so that we're getting real user perspective, real user input, and we're coming up with practical, useful improvements that help improve our force readiness. So that's our goal. That's our ultimate goal, and we appreciate your all's involvement in helping us help you. Thank you. Over.
Thank you, Van. This is Kelly. I just want to emphasize also that this effort is now getting a lot more attention from leadership. This is very important to Ms. Hirschman, and now we're starting to get some leverage and the support we need. As you know, today digital learning and digital data is a big priority with the department, and our current situation with the corona epidemic just reinforces how important digital learning capability is to the department's readiness. So again, just reiterate what Dan said, that working together, this isn't as easy as it looks, but together we definitely can get this done, and we are making progress. So thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, panelists. If you are watching and you want the slides, you should have received an email with the slides, but there's also under the handouts tab in GoToWebinar, there's a PDF with everything you saw today. So if we moved past something a little too quickly, you can have it to review. So thank you, panelists, and thank you everyone for tuning in and sending in your great questions. Thank you for joining, and have a great day.